All right. Well, when we start thinking about growth, something you and I are accustomed to and probably love more than anything, I'm always hampered by the inability to grow based upon either the speed of the market or the ability to support the growth. And so when we start thinking about that, that's why we kicked off this whole new series we're excited to, which is really it's a survival guide for support leaders in the age of AI because times have
Mm,
changed, product momentum, velocity, your customers. And so our goal for the show here is really to talk a little bit about what you're seeing, why you
mm,
invested in AppEdge, and what
mm.
every founder leaving this episode should think of. So we've already told everyone why we're here and what we're going to be doing. My name is Bobby Napletoni. I'm blessed to have been in this industry for going on 40 years, mostly startups. And I'm joined today with Mark Roberge, who most of you, as we started, already know from probably his HubSpot days and now at Stage 2 Capital. Maybe a quick intro, Mark?
Yeah, sure. I'm a addicting entrepreneur. I was fortunate to get staffed on a startup at the age of 23 before it was cool. Believe it or not, like those of you who weren't working before the late 90s, not a lot of people worked in startups. It was something that rich, bored people did. And and the dot-com wave changed all of that. I got staffed on I was coding at Accenture. I got staffed on a startup, and the rest was history. I went to MIT to try to learn something about doing entrepreneurship from a business perspective, and was the fourth employee at HubSpot. There's a group of us out of MIT that kind of latched on to Brian and Dharmesh early on, and was the founding CRO. And so since then, I've been trying to help out the ecosystem in anywhere I get pulled. That included a full-time faculty position at Harvard Business School. That I've been there for 10 years. I've gone part-time because 6 years ago, I was pitched on the idea to start the first venture fund exclusively run and backed by go-to-market executives. And I thought there was a gaping void in the ecosystem around that, and it seemed to be another important platform for me to try to exploit. So, and I get to do fun things like this with Bobby.
All right. Well, and I'm also going to presume that most entrepreneurs that will be technical would gravitate to someone that actually can speak a language they don't know in such a manner that they can actually decipher and understand it. So that's great. Well, on that note, speaking about investors and investing, so you chose AppEdge. When you met them, what did you first think, and were there characteristics around Akrit, the founder, or the problem set they were
Oh,
attacking?
of course, yeah. So just for some guidance, we probably look at 500 companies for every investment we make, just so you understand like the how highly we think of the company and what we choose them from. I would say like in studying the AI movement the last, many years, obviously we had this breakthrough in 2022 with ChatGPT and it put it on the map for everybody. It had been worked on for 40 years prior to that. But once ChatGPT came out, we entered what I think is the hype cycle, where everyone's like, holy cow, this thing's powerful. This is going to revolutionize the future. And tens of billions are thrown at it, just like in the late 90s. And 9.999 billion are lost. It's just the Gartner hype cycle. Like, we don't know what it is yet. The stuff that's being created is probably iterative. In the beginning of the internet, it was like about putting your brochure online, and we thought that was the internet. No one could see Uber, Snowflake, Salesforce, whatever. And people lost a lot of money. And I think like we went through sort of the wrapper era, the Copilot era, where people were putting like very light IP in front of like the foundational models, and I don't know, just didn't really wasn't into that. And was really trying to study what the disruptive opportunities were. What were the innovators' dilemmas that were actually like reinventing workflow, that were rethinking, in this case, customer support, that couldn't be done before AI. And I think like as the years progressed, we started to see a lot of implementations, but most of the implementations were like in innovation shops. They weren't production grade, and they weren't like really driving success. There were a lot of AI startups, I think, in the last 2 years that like, scaled revenue like crazy. But when you looked under the hood, like people were churning, they weren't using it, it didn't work. And so that was a bunch of screening that had to happen. And then I think the final piece was really just like, do you have a vision that as a startup, you can get there faster than the incumbents and the foundational models? So now all of a sudden you're under like a pretty tight window. And AppEdge checked all those boxes for us. When we looked at it, like the first thing, kind of something that I think we do differently than most on the VC side is, yeah, we love to see like rapid revenue growth and amazing net dollar retention. You don't always see it. And I think our peers tend to weight the top line revenue growth more than the NDR, and we weight the NDR more than the top line revenue growth.
But do you
And
think
we
that's just where you're an operator? Hold on. Do you think that's because you're an operator view versus a VC view? Because if you think about what you just said, you and I as operators, we care about the long-term retention of the customer because we knew how hard it was to capture them in the first place.
probably. I mean, it's
Right?
just
We're
like I've lived through it through so many.
right.
And I think, Bobby, you're probably right. Like, I mean, no offense. Like, I don't mean to poo poo like traditional career VCs. Like, they're the best investors I know. It's just that, like, maybe they gravitate toward their like public equity like instincts, more, which is
Right.
like top line revenue growth, like, multiple PS multiple, whatever. Like,
Yeah.
and in the beginning, I just think it's a far more important foundation to build off net dollar retention, and then even the leading indicator of that, of like usage and value creation, and et cetera.
Right.
And I think part of it too, Bobby, is like, I know we know how to put a great salesperson or leader in. You know what I mean? Like, if you have awesome retention and usage and value creation, and you're just struggling with distribution, that's a problem I can underwrite. And I don't want to like fall into the typical operator VC trap of like underwriting problems. But that's a problem that's very fixable from the board level if you know how to hire salespeople. So that's something that AppEdge checked enormously, that it's hard to find, which is like, I don't think they've even had a churn in like 3 years of their business. I mean, like, you just don't see that in native AI startups.
Right.
And I can go on about the team and
No,
stuff,
no,
but
I
you
think
tell me, Bobby.
you nailed it. No, I was
Yeah.
actually thinking you just actually nailed, which I saw immediately, which was founder
Yeah.
market fit. And
Yeah.
when I see that, I immediately know I don't have to go. I don't need to find anyone else, because if that founder that built something like App Dynamics that people used saw and had the problem, he can't be a unicorn and alone. And so now that's a good segue into what is this AI hype versus real workflow reinvention,
Yeah.
and when we think about what you just said, that NDR is probably closely tied to that real world flow integration. So because once you start impacting it, because you have to remember cost of sales and cost of goods are different, and support
Mhm.
attacks that cancer of profitability that no one ever wants to fund to begin with.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we're just starting to scratch the surface on this perspective of workflow reinvention. I think we've nicely migrated from the wrapper era, where this had like very skinny IP.
So
And
like
I
the
think we're,
internet, like Netscape in '99. I
yeah.
think you said,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, like, this just like case in point, folks. Like, the first couple of years of the internet, we dialed up through AOL, brought up the Netscape browser, and did a search in Alta Vista. Like, that's the era we're in right now, folks. Like,
How
these names
excited
that we
were
know
we?
right now, like, I don't know if they survive. Who knows? Like, if history repeats itself, they won't. So, but like, we gotta look at, like, I think we've nicely migrated from the wrappers to real value creation. But when you look at it now, it's like, you're like, oh, cool. Like, that's a great implementation right there. And you look at like the 50 things they implemented with this native AI platform, and 49 of them are not AI. Like, the pure definition of AI, I think, is like, it's learning. It
Right.
learns without intervention, without a database, without like, and a lot of it is just process streamlining. And I think what's happening is, executives are trying to communicate to either the street if they're public, or their investors if they're not, that they're embracing AI and they're an AI first company. And so there's a lot of pressure in the lines of business to adopt these AI technologies. But I don't think the true AI visions are there yet, but there's enormous motivation to like streamline workflow, whether it's AI or not. So
Right.
that's kind of where we're at right now. But that was another thing that I loved about AppEdge, is not only were they successful in bringing these use cases to life, but it was a true AI implementation. And like, let's get back, Bobby, real quick to like workflow reinvention for a second. Like, if we just look at like the selling process, like, maybe we'll hit an era where, buyer bots are buying from seller bots. That's
It's
that's
how will
pretty
they
far out
transact? I
there.
need to know how they'll transact. Will they have bank accounts, our own credit
I
cards?
know
Will they use
exactly. I mean,
crypto?
that one's way out there,
Is
but
it?
I don't know. I think so. I mean, I think we get caught up because in the bubbles we live in that we think the stuff's coming faster than it is. And I would say the first, call it 2.5 years since the breakout, has a lot happened. I mean, like, it's a mess for K through 12, but like Uber drivers are still driving, like, like lawyers are still practicing law. Like, it's coming,
Right,
but it's slower than we think. And I
right.
think in like an example in the support arena is like, what I mean by workflow reinvention is uh, the whole premise of support software has been to manage the ticket. But what if AI can get rid of the ticket? That's an
We're
example
gonna
of
go.
like,
That's not where we want to get to. Is beyond the. The ticket was
exactly.
born in the '80s. In the '80s,
Right. Yeah.
think about that. And that same ticket today. By the way, how many tickets do you think are opened in the world every day?
Gosh, I have no idea. I mean, my deep principal
Billion.
diligenzers on AppDedge probably know, but what? Yeah, it's got to be.
It's a 500 million tickets a day, and that same ticket is reset my password to my nuclear reactor's about to blow. They go through those same, like you said, workflows, which used to be post-it notes that were put into the system. That now the machine needs to know what's really happening. And that takes us to this product support, maybe distribution flywheel, which we're thinking about. Like, if you could know what you know, could you sell and support your customers better from within the product and almost make it a self-healing product?
Right. We got to rip all this stuff down to first principles.
Yeah,
We can't agree with a lot as a society today, but I think we can all agree that we don't like support tickets
none
as a
of us.
customer and as a vendor. So like that's just an example, right? But like, we can bring all of our processes, how we write code, how we sell product, how we close the books.
The
We can
code you
bring
saw
those
in
down to
Microsoft,
first
Satya,
principles.
Satya said 30% of their code was AI. Just read that yesterday.
Wonderful.
But think about the amount of innovation and people you don't have to hire. But more importantly, you let humans build rather than do and create, like more important things in the analogy of that. So as you think about this, how have you saw that support teams were historically solve this problem across your portfolio today? How are most folks dealing with it in tickets fashion?
Yeah, I mean, in the startup ecosystem, like there's a couple different phases of that. I do like the movement. If you're early stage here listening, I see great founders actually be a little slow to delegate customer support and tickets. Like it's gold, right? When you have that stuff and keeping that process close to product is enormous. But like other than that, once they get up into scale, it's kind of like there's not a huge difference between I think how people have been implementing it in the last 2 years compared to like 2005. It's the same process. So we're such in the early, and it shouldn't be. So we're like such in the early innings of changing this workflow. There's a huge opportunity there.
I think that that's where we're going to see these silos start breaking down because it actually will be passed across multiple groups where you'll actually start seeing some of those things. And it may even be the collapse of strict rules where people had this role and that's all they did, where support was really confined into what they did. And you almost see that product people are now paying attention to support because that can allow them to innovate faster.
I think that's absolutely true, Bobby. I think like that is a even more abstract observation right now is like, to continue on this, like how the era has evolved. Obviously, we've heavily moved into the agentic era. And I think most people have a lot more conviction around the disruptive potential and sustainability of the agentic era. And I think you can start to imagine basically if you look at like as we've evolved the last 20 years in the software ecosystem, humans have remained on the front line, whether they're writing code or selling product. And we've made tremendous evolutions in the tech stack to make them streamlined and better. RevOps wasn't a career 15, 20 years ago. And now it's so critical. We've seen our
Right.
first CROs that came up through RevOps. We've seen our first CEOs that came up through RevOps. It's amazing. What an important like discipline. But that could potentially switch where the humans don't do the frontline work anymore. The tech does. What we consider as like our support our software behind the scenes that make us 20% faster suddenly takes over. It writes the code, it sells the product, it manages support issues, which may not be the submission of a ticket. And the people are just operating the agents, right? Just like hiring the right agents, training the right agents, optimizing the agents, integrating the agents. And what that essentially does, to your point, Bobby, is it allows an opportunity for us to blur the traditional organizational boundaries that exist. We have boundaries between support and product, between sales and marketing, between finance and engineering, because there are not a lot of people out there that are like all the above. It's a
Cross-functional
human
engagement.
limitation. Right.
Yeah.
It's a human limitation. But suddenly when you have agents doing this stuff, those boundaries go away. We don't have to operate in the same organizational silos, and we can capitalize on we can, I guess, take advantage of the traditional deficiency we've had by not having better communication between all those organizations in this new organization, in this new design. So I don't know if that was too out there, Bobby, but just bring it back to this particular piece. It's like, yeah,
I
maybe
think
you
it's
can capstone it for me. Yeah.
they're really concerned. So when you think about us from the support, they're really concerned about the competition and the selling, because it will have changed so much that your competition is changing quicker than your people can be trained. So traditional training will change because you can't train for yesterday's products because your competition's innovating. And it made me start thinking that that's the crystal.
I agree. Like, I think absolutely. I mean, I would say the cloud era brought a new KPI for us, and that was customer retention. And I think the entire founding executive team of HubSpot would all agree that it took us way too many years to figure that out. Like in
What do
the
you think?
on-prem
What was the
arena,
hardest part? What was the
but
hardest part to figure? You guys were all
it's just
smart.
you get stuck in history. You get stuck in like, hey, at the time, it's crazy to think that like the big pothole to avoid was not to have too much services revenue, because that was the issue with the past generation of the businesses. Was like it was all about ARR growth. Customer retention didn't matter because the best sales teams won. Like, I mean, do you remember the concept of shelfware? Like that
Oh
was a
yeah.
very prevalent concept because like the best sales teams won. Once like you sold the on-prem software, the company had to buy 50 servers to install it on and go through like a 6-month change management process with like Accenture to get everyone trained. The software sucked. It didn't matter. They were stuck with it. So we're just like, you're building off of that arena. And then all of a sudden you don't realize that like that doesn't happen anymore. People just click login and they're there. And it's really easy to adopt, but it's also easy to leave. And you have these subscription revenues that are annuity streams. And all of a sudden it's like, holy cow, the most important metric in our organization is customer retention. And so now, to your point, Bobby, is the most important metric as we enter the AI era revenue per employee.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Profitability and revenue.
Right. Revenue, profitability per employee, revenue, however you structure it. But like you get the point is like those that can adopt the efficiency innovations fastest will win. And at the board level, that's probably the best way to summarize it.
Yeah, that was our outcome. Like, but we have to figure out how we're going to measure these outcomes because there's not like a tool yet. But I completely agree with you. So from one of the questions from the group, which is, what do you look for in founders, and what makes you say no immediately?
Yeah, I mean, the saying no immediately usually isn't something with a founder. It's usually, oftentimes it's like, I'll just say really quick, keep it. And it took me a long time to learn this as an entrepreneur, even as an investor potentially. Remember that VCs raise money from other investors. And when we did that, we did it on a particular thesis. What we're investing in, the stage we're investing in, the check we're going to deploy, the ownership we're going to buy, all that stuff. So oftentimes when we look at your business, we think it's an amazing business, but it's not the right investment for us.
It's not
so
an ICP. It's not an
yeah,
ICP.
exactly. So, and a lot of entrepreneurs don't know that. Oh, you're a VC, you have money. Why don't you invest in me? It's like I promised my LPs a thesis. I have to abide by that. So that's number one is like, just because a VC passes, don't like think you're not an ugly baby. You know what I mean? Like it's just, you're a great business. We just like, it's just not the fit for our thesis. Now,
Wait, we all hear that. Hold on. That's the hardest part for a founder to hear. It's not a fit for me, because that just means not me, not right now. It's like dating, and no one never really finds out why no one wants to date you though.
It's not me. It's not you. It's me. You know, I hate to say it, but it's like, but like you got to, as a founder, you got to do discovery. I do it for my LPs. I meet a family office. I'm like, I'm trying to get their money, but I'm like, okay, how are you allocating across fixed income, public equities, and private equities, and alternatives? And within alternatives, are you looking at hedge funds, PE, or VC? And within VC, are you looking at late stage or early stage software, life sciences? Like, I'm just trying to figure out what they're looking for. Because if they're like, yeah, we're over indexed on VC right now, we're trying to find fixed income, it's like, well, let's not waste our time. And it's
Right.
not that my VC sucks. It's just like, it's not a fit. And that's
Right.
like, that's just, I'd encourage folks to do that. But to your point on founder, I like coachability, which is so funny because I liked it for sales too. And I hate to say that. And I sound like I'm just cut and pasting, but this is from
No,
like
you're not.
so many founder
You
conversations. And coachability is a complex thing because it's like, on one end, there's so many layers to coachability. The first layer is, are they even open to coaching? So there are founders who are like, yeah, this is my vision for this product. I'm going to build it. I don't really care if it like said another, like if it works or whatever. I'm not open to feedback. Like this is my perspective, like whatever. It's like, okay, well, that's not good. They also could be open to feedback, but then they don't filter it for their own knowledge of their business. Like I'll show up and I'll like do a half-hour call. I'm like, okay, here's my recommendations. And if they implement all 10 recommendations, I'm like, whoa, there's no way I'm right on everything. Like, dude, you live in this for 80 hours a week. I spent 30 minutes, like filter it, And then, so there's a little bit of that, of like pushing, like implementing the stuff that like get a light bulbs off, push back on the stuff that they don't think fits, and then asking to verify the stuff they don't understand to see if it does fit. And then the pace by which they implement it. Like our best investments often, like we're doing diligence over a 60-day period. And like after the first week, they're like, oh yeah, by the way, hopefully this works out, but we already implemented all the changes you pointed out. That's sick.
Right. That's a great one. So, on that same note, then founders probably, first of all, your coachability, we'll double click into that. I believe in our roles being sales leaders, you have to coach people up and out. And it's a bad day because, first of all, half your income so your family could actually eat and go to school is that the product someone built, someone would want to give you money for. So, like, just breaking that
Yeah.
down. And so that coaching is really about having a bad day on the court. We've all had them if you've played sports. And so that role as a coach is way more important than I think people take for granted in our particular background roles. And I've found with CEOs that understand the reason for coachability, because there's this guy that has more green jackets than anyone. He's got a coach,
Of
right?
course.
Tiger Woods. And so,
Who should not have a coach, Bobby? Exactly.
right, who should not have a coach? And to your point, understanding the right advice to seek from, which then brings
Yes.
me to the blind spots we all have, how to
Yes.
identify them.
Don't go to your English teacher for physics advice and your physics advice for grammar advice. You got to know who to go to.
Right. I was just that takes us to closing reflections and advice to founders, which is what you just started. So we couldn't have timed this more perfectly. And then we'll jump into some actual Q&A as well.
Nice. Yeah, I would say like I'll hinge on one, and that is just appreciate as a founder how much advantage you have relative to the existing landscape to be able to build an organization from the ground up right now in the advent of AI tech rollout that we're in right now. Like just to like really push your thinking here. Not that I'd recommend this, but just to push your thinking. I just can't wait for an entrepreneur to show up and be like, yeah, I don't really have a good product idea. I'm just going to copy Slack. My idea is I'm going to do it with like 90% less people and sell it for 90% less.
This money. You still got the adoption, the awareness, the education, the trust, but you're right. That will be my first task working for Mark, building the App Exchange was go find someone to build CRM on your platform, Bobby. So I've got forced out like,
Nice.
well, that never
That's
happened.
awesome.
But we get a lot of other things built. So that's I also hear one of the things I preach is slow down to go fast, because the sequencing of what you want to achieve is way more important than the achievement itself, because you could get there and ring that bell not knowing who died along that journey and what did we not. Yeah, I know. Yeah, right. So it's not a win at all costs.
Yeah.
So let's spend the last couple minutes to see if we have any questions from the group. And if not, we're going to do a quick wrap up on what we think is how's everyone supporting their customers today and how they should give us a ring. So let's take it over. Let's see here. All right. We've got one more question that came in. What other products or companies did you look for in this support arena? Because you clearly had a hypothesis and a thesis, as they're asking, that this was an area. Did you meet Akrit and AppEdge and go fall in love, or was the due diligence really tough? And what did you hear along that made you have conviction?
Yeah, I'm not sure there was much new to that. I confess that we weren't like running this like customer support thesis, but we were running a go to market thesis around those elements. And the go to market did transcend everything from prospecting to sales execution to customer support to customer success. And it was really those bullets that I talked about. Like a lot of the stuff we felt were wrappers. They weren't disruptive visions. They didn't have a workflow reinvention, and they didn't have a strong enough technical team to bring to the table. It's really hard to find one that checked all the boxes. I know we looked at a ton of customer support software, and it it just didn't check as much as that. So I apologize that it's a lot of redundancy, but I don't think there's much new beyond those elements and filters we talked about.
Before I decided to spend time, I took a look at everything in the support. Having run support at a couple companies like at Twilio and Salesforce and the partner group, the pain that exists. And I was blown away with Anthony and Akrit's in-depth architectural knowledge of how the enterprises work to get to those hard kernels that you actually understand the workings of support within an organization. So that their OG-ness is what was an attraction in terms of understanding where to get to. While we may not be where everyone wants to be, we're clearly crushing it. Listen, thank you so much for sharing with the audience what the future is going to look like, what you're looking for in the future, and why everyone building software selling to B2B should take a look at AppEdge and how it can transform not just their profitability, the way in which they engage customers, and get that 200 plus NDR that they're getting today, right?
Heck yeah.
All right. Well, listen, thank you so much for your time. It's been such a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. It's been great.